Thank you very much. Great. That later on in the chapter we are in on Varav Chesed, a great amount of loving kindness, he talks about Lashon Hara. Remember? He brings up the whole issue of Lashon Hara. And there's a very famous story about Lashon Hara, speech, Lashon Hara, evil speech, but really it's about gossip, right? Is the main thrust of Lashon Hara. And the story that he actually included in the chapter is that famous one about the person who's called to the rabbi's office, and this person, I hesitate to say she because it's such a terrible, generalization. I mean, guys gossip as much as women do, but it's just a terrible, terrible. Like all of the heroes are men, and all of the people who gossip are women. So I'm refraining from that. But anyway, he tells the story about the person who comes to the rabbi, and the rabbi, because he's confronting her with things that she has said about other people. And, it's only, I talked a little bit. And then, of course, it ends with him telling that person to take a pillow and to rip it open and let go of all the feathers. Does this ring a bell from the chapter? Okay. So in this book, and if you have the book in front of you, Mary Rita, it's on page 94. And why don't you help me read this? Because this is Heather Forrest, the storyteller. She made a poem out of it. I thought that might be a nice way to start. So, Mary Rita, you got it?
I got it.
All right, good. You're unmuted. So why don't you start off and read everything in italics, and then I'll read the next paragraph, and then we'll switch back and forth between paragraphs. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay. All righty. So Mary Reed is about to read the words that actually Heather Forrest also put to music, and it goes something like this. Words like feathers fly, and it's notated in the book. In the wind, reaching far and wide, in the wind, careless words tossed about, cannot again be swallowed up. Tongues like swords can cut the heart, words fly out, the rumors start, cruel words like feathers fly.
Cruel. I'll pick up from where you left off. Yes. Cruel words reach far and wide. Try and try to gather them again, but they fly away in the wind.
A woman whose tongue was sharp and unkind was accused of starting a rumor. She was brought before the village rabbi protesting, "What I said was in jest, just humor. My words were carried forth by others. I am not to blame."
But the victim cried for justice, saying, "You soiled my own good name."
"I can make amends," said the woman accused. "I'll just take back my words and assume I'm excused."
The rabbi listened to what she said and sadly thought as he shook his head, "This woman does not comprehend her crime. She shall do it again and again in time."
And so he said to the woman accused, "Your careless words cannot be excused until you bring my feather pillow to the market square, cut it up, and let the feathers fly through the air. And when this task is done, bring me back the feathers, every one."
The woman reluctantly agreed. She thought, "The wise old rabbi's gone mad indeed." But to humor him, she took his pillow to the village square. She cut it, and feathers filled the air.
She tried to catch, she tried to snatch, she tried to collect each one. But weary with effort, she clearly discovered the task could not be done.
She returned with very few of the feathers in hand. I couldn't get them back. They've scattered over the land. I suppose she sighed as she lowered her head, like the words I can't take back from the rumor I spread.
Cruel words like feathers fly, cruel words reach far and wide. They leave the mouth a bitter rind. May all your words, my friend, be kind. Mary Rita, take a bow. So there you have it. And actually, for those of you who have taken our storytelling workshop, and those of you who even haven't, it's a nice exercise actually to take a story that is favorable to you, and perhaps make a poem out of it. Roxanne, I assume that you would be very, very good at that. So, my friends, we jumped a little bit today towards the end of the chapter, starting with that. Um, but I thought that would be a fun way to start. So let's begin at the beginning on page 63. I have to admit, when I read this piece from Avot de Rabbi Natan, tears came to my eyes. And it made me think, first of all, I have never really studied Talmud in the way that many other rabbis have. But rabbis who study all the time and who have a relationship with it that I don't have talk about their tears falling on to the Sefer, into the book as they read the various conversations. So this brought a tear to mind. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Yeshua were on their way out of Jerusalem. Seeing the destroyed temple, Rabbi Yochanan exclaimed, "How awful for us! The place where the sins of Israel could be forgiven lies in ruins." And Rabbi Yochanan replied, "My son, do not grieve. We have another equally effective form of atonement. What is it? Acts of kindness. For it is written, I desire kindness, not sacrifice."
Mm.
So this being the jumping off point for this chapter is a beautiful reminder for us, and for those of us who know what's in that Siddur, that some of us daven from, um, in the hope that the temple be restored. I don't pray for that because the turmoil that it would take for that to happen is indescribable. But it's right in our texts that those sacrifices of long ago, Reb Zalman of blessed memory used to say, at one point in our history, God wanted lamb chops. Now God wants the heart. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Page 65. And again, as always, please feel free to interrupt with any comments, any thoughts, any retorts. In the middle of the page, talking about Jesus challenges you to measure your ability to actualize kindness in relation to those who cannot further your goals. So in other words, that there be, hi Judy, bye Judy, that there be no alternative motive. And I might have mentioned this last week about the greatest mitzvah shel emet. A true mitzvah is, and I usually say something to this effect when I do a funeral, which is people come to a funeral out of respect for the deceased and of course the living as well, but there's no ulterior motive on their part because the deceased cannot pay them back. There's nothing that they could seek to gain from the deceased. And okay, that's great. And of course, 2 lines later, it says that. Maybe I'm remembering from what I read, but I've got notes all over this book. On a similar note, the rabbis of Jesus' time said that one of the highest acts of kindness is to tend to the dead, for the dead are the quintessential example of the least of these. Right? And then
Mark, I think that's, in our, not just the time of the rabbis, but in our time, I think that's what the Hebrew Kadisha is about also.
absolutely, absolutely. Have you ever served on one, Judy?
I have not, my husband has.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to admit it's one of the gaping holes in my rabbinic experience. I have served as a shomer, but not
Yeah, me too. I've gone and read Psalms and,
but not preparing the body.
right.
Um, and I guess just sometimes you need to know your limitations. And I could share with you, but I won't, about the doctor who helped me get over my squeamishness of serving in a hospital at um, the National Institute of Health, which is where I did my pastoral care training. The other suffering is your suffering if you truly understand the non-duality of self and the other, and that's towards the end of the page. Um, this reminds me, I think last week, going over again the what's repeated over and over and over in this book is spacious mind versus narrow mind, and that's where non-duality can be sensed in that place. And so he keeps on again returning to encouraging us to cultivate practices that take us there. Not that we can live there, and not that it's desirable to live in that place. As I jokingly say, why we're driving in the car. Although, we still need to have a wide lanes at those points too. The suffering of the least among us is yours as well, and until you experience it directly, you cannot act with true loving kindness. Doing so is what the practice of Tonglen is all about. And so I made a note possibly for when Reb Rami is with us to take us through this practice of Tonglen. I'm going to talk to him beforehand and not put him on the spot, but it is my understanding of it is about holding suffering, right? That in opening ourselves up to that place where spacious mind is present, then it is possible to hold, as he says, spacious mind on the bottom of page 66. Spacious mind has room for infinite suffering. But I don't think it's in the way that Bill Clinton used to say, I feel your pain, right? I think it's something different than that, because I'm not even sure what he meant by that when he said that, except to show, some empathy. But if we actually held, and felt the pain of the world, I think that would be insufferable. That would we wouldn't be able to bear that. I'm looking at you. Send forth your breath and renew the surface of the earth. He gave a quote at the top of page 66 that I actually found the Hebrew for in Psalm 104:30, where he says, "Tishlach ruchcha yivaruun, v'titchadesh panav adama." You send forth your breath and renew the surface of the earth. So this is a practice that transforms the suffering of others by using the breath. Were any of you attracted to this? Did any of you? No, Roxanne says no emphatically.
No, in settings where, in Buddhist settings, I just sit, when they do Tonglen, I just sit. It feels very unhealthy to me. I just know. Everything in me says no.
Yeah.
Now, hearing you say that one line from "you send forth your breath and renew the surface of the earth," if I was really going to say to myself, I need to experience this, I need to do this, I wouldn't be able to do it without thinking that I was becoming like the breath of God, like something that God was helping me, because I know that I personally with the limitations of a human body, I don't want to be doing this. There are other ways that I have compassion for people and reach out to them, but Tonglen has always, all of me resists it.
So you have been in Buddhist settings where this practice was done and you resisted and didn't go there.
Yeah, more than once.
And I got you in a second, Catherine. And what did you have an experience of any kind of others who were doing the practice?
You know, I can never tell. I always wonder, you know, there's a certain pressure, so everybody's going like looking all, you know, and breathing and all this, and I'm always wondering, really, are you doing this? You know, am I the only one kind of going, this feels really unhealthy, this doesn't help anything, you know? So I don't know. But people seem to be sort of entranced with it. I don't know.
And I'm going to get to you, Catherine, but I have more questions about what you shared, Roxanne, and I'm grateful that you did. Can you share more about, was there any kind of hesitation because of the image of God breathing through you, or am I misunderstanding what you
No,
said?
I thought what I meant was, if I ever said to myself, no, you really have to do this, after reading that line that you read, I would say, God, let me be a vessel for you, God. Go ahead, you know, cleanse, purify, whatever it is you're doing about the suffering of the world. But I am not doing it. But I feel the power on a cellular level of how our mind does things to our bodies.
Mm.
And because I feel that that is very powerful, I would not choose to do this practice because I believe it is powerful. And I don't know what repercussions it would have on a cellular level. And I'm trying not to be superstitious about it. I have to listen to my body going, no,
Yeah.
you know?
Shamati, I receive. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and your honesty, which will bring up the question of whether anybody, and you don't have to answer me right now, you can put in the chat or you can just write to me, whether this is something you would me rather not ask Reb Rami to carry us through. Because I wouldn't want to do that if you felt that rather not. Okay, so please communicate. Judy, I'll get to you in a second. Catherine, please.
I just wanted to agree with Roxanne. I've been in settings where Tonglen has been introduced and where we were to do it, and I just don't think it's healthy to take within myself the pain of the world. That we can breathe in peace and breathe out love, but breathing in suffering just doesn't make sense to me.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. Somebody else was going to say, oh, Judy, please. You have to unmute, Judy.
My understanding of it is that it is a practice of transformation. I just quickly was looking for something that Pema Chodron wrote about this, and I'm just going to read a couple sentences. People often say that this practice goes against the grain of how we usually hold ourselves together. Truthfully, this practice does go against the grain of wanting things on our own terms, of wanting it to work out for ourselves no matter what happens to others. The practice dissolves the armor of self-protection we've tried so hard to create around ourselves. In Buddhist language, one would say that it dissolves the fixation and clinging of ego. So I have within a group here in Colombia that is connected to Plum Village, done this practice. And I haven't found it to be unhealthy. I have found that what happens to me is that there is, so it's almost like an alchemy kind of a reaction within my body. and a kind of melting into the universal being where all things are considered.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I actually made a note at the top of page 67. Um, Spacious mind transforms the dark into the light and returns it to the world as a blessing. So there's the transformation you're talking about, Judy. On a different theological plane, Tonglen parallels the crucifixion of Jesus as a way to take upon oneself the pain of the world and transform it into love. And the note that I made was whether this is equivalent in a way to the line that was taken out of the conservative Siddur years ago and then placed back into it most recently, V'ishei Yisrael, meaning the fire offerings of Israel, right? And sacred service go towards uh, as an offering, right? In order to cleanse ourselves, exactly what you're saying, Judy. Um, so I'm not taking a stand on whether we should try this or not. You know, as a group, when Reb Rami is here, I saw a note flash before my eyes in the chat, and I will respect your wishes. I am kind of curious to, to do it myself, but I would want to do it with somebody else who's guiding me. Um, period. So somebody else had something, Carol Ann, and then we'll move on.
No, well, a couple of things. One is, as I listen to the news and some moments come up where the world news is so horrendous, and I can listen for a little bit and then I have to pull back because I know I have great empathy, great passion, just sadness for all those who suffer. And so I have to monitor that. But on the other hand, to me, and the second point, there's a little bit of a likeness to our praying for those of us for those we care about who are suffering for God to relieve their pain. So it's maybe one step further. We've already experienced that, and it actually does give me energy to do that because then I'm paying attention to someone else. I'm not egocentric. I'm thinking about somebody else and asking God for help for them. So in a way that's like that, it's just taking it further to heal the world. And it does speak about transformation, to breathe, to transform the suffering.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's an incredible, powerful thing to be able to even imagine you can do that.
Great. And self-care above all. Right? And it says at the bottom, alluding to what you just said, of 67, whenever I encounter suffering, I breathe it in. I've discovered that I can take in infinite suffering as long as I am willing to breathe out infinite peace.
Mm.
And the suffering does not stay. It's transformed and returned to the world as love. And so am I. I remember years ago, a Buddhist friend of mine showed me a practice of self-care, of breathing in light into the food that she was about to eat,
Mm.
so and seeing that food transform to light, and then so that when she ate it, it would serve in much the same way that Rami is articulating here about Tonglen, so that she live, her life more spaciously with, the most compassion for other creatures as she possibly can.
I would do that practice. That wouldn't bother me. That would be, lovely. It's not that I don't do imaginative
Yeah.
or intention, have my intentions. Yeah, and I loved that on page 67 what that nurse said to him.
Would you read it, please?
The nurse, whose name I can no longer remember, took me aside one afternoon and said, "It is lovely that you visit so often, but you are still a stranger here. Of course, we all know who you are, but you are not at home here. You are resisting the suffering that resides here. And in so doing, you are resisting the love as well. You have to shatter the armor you wear in this house. You won't die. On the contrary, you might truly learn to live." And I did Shabbat services for 10 years at a assisted living facility. And you, I had to open myself up to the suffering, and that sometimes I would come in on a Friday night and somebody will have passed away. And the suffering that was, people being ill and all of that. And I did open myself to it, and it did change my mind and help me live more, because I understood that I am them, and I will age and all of that. Yeah. So that I agree with a lot of the things, but where he's trying to go. This particular practice is a no-go for me, but I'm not, and also the transformation, like I am not sure I can transform like that. If I take in the suffering, I'm not positive I feel that I have truly transformed it, so maybe it's, I don't know, maybe I'm not as, not very far along or something. I don't know what it is, but I don't feel that transformation in that way.
Yeah, I'm also wondering too, thank you, Roxanne, whether we need to make sure that we're in a, this is why I'm talking about doing this under a guided situation, because the person who would guide me, I would want that person to know me very, very well, and whether or not I was capable of entering into this state while still and taking care of myself, right? So that if I am in any kind of unbalance, if I have an imbalance in my life, this is not a place to go. But even if I'm very healthy, right, it might not be a place to go. Uh, and I hear you saying that too. It's just a choice. Like I'm not going there, and I think that is an honest and a correct decision for each of us individually to make about whatever practice that we're going to do. Judy?
So I'm just going to take issue here for a moment, because when I learned about this Tonglen practice from my Buddhist community, I was in a very difficult place in my life. I don't need to talk about it, but going through and hearing about this experience of sharing the suffering of the world, it actually it made me feel like, okay, well, I'm not alone here. Like there's a lot of suffering. My suffering's different from other people's suffering. Absolutely. But that recognition that I am suffering, other people are suffering, like you feel a little bit like, okay, well, I'm not alone here. So, I guess I just want to take issue with that sort of idea that you can't go do this when you're not feeling whole, because maybe it's more, I don't know, comforting in some sense when you're not feeling whole, but you recognize that you are not alone in that suffering experience.
Wow, thank you, Judy. What a beautiful array of thoughts on this subject. Something that you just said, Judy, that I hadn't thought of before was that it's possible that the practice would also make me in taking in the suffering of the world laugh at myself for a moment, meaning that, oh, what I'm quote unquote suffering about is really not that discount my suffering, but my suffering is like, let me tell you about, suffering, which I can only assume that many of us also, we do from time to time, is that our suffering is real, and yet it's within the context of a much larger world that we live in. And that's what the spacious mind is, how that's resonating with me now, of a feeling that we're a small part in this larger, in which there's also, there's a time to live and a time to die. There's both sides of the equation. So I'm only assuming that, with someone who knows how to lead this, is going to lead me out of the experience in some gentle way, reminding me that, you don't want to hold on to this. That would be destructive. And anyway, final word, anyone? I don't want to have the final word here if anybody else wants to put a khatima on this. Okay. Maybe later you'll think of it. Alrighty.
Jay had something.
Jay is here.
Yeah. Hi, I'm here. There was something about this, is this idea of the transformation of what you bring in doesn't stay suffering. And that it gets that by the process that, we, I don't know if it's healing, but turning it, and I'm talking about, the process of turning it into a blessing for both you, for me and the world. I'm dealing with a lot of suffering right now, and I'm trying to, even it's just my own and not the world, trying to see what to do with it. And the idea that my most basic bodily function of breathing can turn that into something of, I don't want to say joy, but to transform that from oxygen to carbon dioxide to feed the trees that in turn feed us as part of a cycle, is, for me, there's something healing in that for me and the world beyond me.
Yeah, isn't that something? Through the very process of breathing. So never, myself, never having done it, I can't say anything more about it because right now it's just an idea. But I'll report back to you if and when I do have the experience. In the middle of page 68, he starts to transition in talking about Dennis Prager in his wonderful book, Happiness is a Serious Problem, arguing that happiness is a moral issue. Happy people are more engaged, more generous, more likely to alleviate another's suffering. As simplistic as it sounds, happy people are kinder people. Your happiness is good for everyone, but can you cultivate happiness directly? Can you simply make yourself happy? And then, of course, he says, I can't. In Psalm 100, I always wondered about Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, to serve God with gladness, with joy. And before I started thinking about it in more depth, I had a very bad reaction to that, which was, well, shouldn't I also serve God when I'm morose and down? Do I have to, gray skies above will clear up, put on a happy face? Is that what I'm being asked to do? And I've kind of worked through that for myself, but I was curious, can you make yourself happy? And in what ways can you cultivate joy, but not ha-ha joy? And what does it even mean? Ivdu et Adonai b'simcha. Mary Rita?
So the very first teaching that Reb Morsha gave us at DLTI was on Simha. And I remember something just told me to record it, and it's the most powerful teaching. And she talks about Simha is not just joy. If it was, she said there's so many times in life, she wouldn't be able to really stand and be who she is. And she talked about that, to make it just joy, we would lose a sense of our aliveness because there are so many different feelings. And so she introduced what I heard, and the way I hold Simha is that it holds all feelings, including pain. And I had just done a study of Jacob's dream. And there is a Hasidic Rebbe who looks at the ascending and descending as, holding basically that life is not just the ascending, as we talked about when we looked at it, but it's also the descending, and it's the ups and the downs, and it's the suffering as well as the joy. So I never see it then as just joy. I see it as holding, you know, all the feelings of the world, and it makes a whole lot more sense to me.
Place where opposites merge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Judy, but Elliot, welcome. Sorry I didn't acknowledge your presence before. Judy.
So I think that for me, that becomes a gratitude practice. And speaking to Reb Marsh's teaching, I think that part of that is not just being grateful for the wonderful things that happen to you. I think there's a real spiritual practice of finding what to be grateful for in the pain. I haven't quite worked through all of that, but it's certainly something that I've been thinking a lot about and trying to integrate into my life in terms of, well, for me, the death of my son, but I mean, other painful things too. I think, so how do you maintain that sense of serving God with gladness at times when you're not really glad? So what is there to be grateful for in that experience? What is there to learn from that experience? Is where my mind and my thinking goes.
Thank you, Judy. And you actually helped with a transition in my notes. Can you cultivate happiness? And then I wrote, yes, through gratitude. Deborah, and then Catherine.
Well, I never believed that I could make myself happy. I mean, it was up to me to be happy, but if I wasn't happy, I couldn't make myself be happy. And looking for things, I was cynical about all of that, looking for things to be grateful for. And I was just stuck in that place. And I think that for any of these things, you have to have, no, I can't say you. I had to have my mental health in a better place in order for these things to finally click in. And I'm in a place right now where I have a joy that comes out of me and a happiness that I've never experienced before. Suddenly there's just this, it's like the synapses, the spark just went from one place to the other, and I don't know what happened, but it's just really different. So I'm not sure, I don't think you can, I can't say you. I don't think I can make myself be anything, but if I study and practice enough with the things that I aspire to, then when things finally do come together, it will work.
Amen. Amen. And I just want to throw a little wrench into that. And I don't want to invite comments on this, and Catherine will get to you in a second, but it is the very basics of Hasidic, the foundation of Hasidic thought, as seen through the eyes of Reb Nachman of Bratslav, who was bipolar, is that Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha is the foundation, right? So there's a lot to understand that I don't understand, of whether or not we have to be, in a certain mental state to live that. But let's not go there right now. But if anybody wants to, prepare a drash on it and bring it to Moshe one day, well, Catherine.
Telling myself to be happy is not useful, or that I should be happy, which is even worse. I've spent years dealing with depression, and the worst thing to tell me is that, oh, don't worry, be happy. I don't think so. It just doesn't work when you're dealing with, when I'm dealing with depression, intractable depression. So I suppose it's possible. I haven't quite gotten, well, I use the term joy rather than happy in any case, because I think happy is just this feeling that comes and goes.
Mhm.
But I'm still taking steps. You know, the gratitude piece is a part of my healing. But it just wouldn't have worked for me. It didn't work for me. If I could have been happy, I would have been happy. I couldn't.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah.
And thank you for giving us the opportunity to witness what you just shared with us, and to hold you for these few moments. Does anyone know how to pronounce Nakan? Naikan?
Nikon? Nikon?
Well, I've been pronouncing it Nikon, but I don't suspect that that might not be correct. Cultivating kindness through Nikon? Nikon? Nikon?
No, the Japanese would be Nikon.
It is Nikon. Thank you. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
Jay, you would know.
Yeah, Khan.
That's
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
Nikon.
Yeah, the AI gives it I. It's
So
by itself can mean love.
Well, I actually took this practice and I started using it, but not with what did my mother do for me? What did I do for her? And what trouble did I cause her? And then, as he suggests, moving on to different relations. Nikon is not about changing anything, but about seeing everything. I really liked that. I liked it a lot more than the Tonglen, that's for sure. And so I started replacing the Shema B'Mitah, you know, the bedtime Shema, the entire of the bedtime Shema, which I do in pieces anyway, with this. That he suggests in a more general way. What have I received today? What have I given today? And are there any troubles or difficulties? What does he say? What trouble, inconvenience, difficulty did I cause today? And in just doing it now, right now for myself, I can answer all of those questions. And I wonder if there's any days in our life where we wouldn't be able to answer that. And in the few nights that I've done it, it didn't make me feel bad, you know, or good, or it just was. It was kind of like a doing a cheshbon hanefesh, which we do anyway, you know, in the Shema B'Mitah. But this felt okay. Let me try something a little different, and it felt really genuine and opening, as he says. It's not about changing anything, but seeing everything. And in the act of seeing, there is a transformation that makes kindness not only possible, but almost inevitable. I'm reading on 70, the end of the third paragraph. And that's the same thing that he talks about in the Tonglen, right? It's about transforming something, right? Creating the space in which we can truly see ourselves, and then cultivating kindness to ourselves within that place. You know, I'm only a human. This is what I did today. Linda.
I have what in my mind feels like a loaded question. Do I need to seek comfort outside of Judaism? Because Rami's not presenting Jewish custom particularly. I'm glad that he's found other disciplines to help him find his peace. I'm having enough trouble sitting where I am, and the idea of having to go off and start learning a whole other set of disciplines and try to fold them into what I'm learning seems kind of daunting to me.
Thank you, Linda. I think as with anything else, to quote Robbie Robertson, you take what you need and you leave the rest, right? If you have the time and the space in your life, Reb Zalman, of blessed memory, I mean, this is what he did. He went and to other people's, spiritual laboratories. And what he experienced, he was then able to take back into his own practice in order to deepen it. Right? It's not to go elsewhere, but sometimes we do need to do that in order to find our authentic selves and find out what works for us. But I pray that that this book is not overwhelming you with a feeling that, oh, I got to go try all of these things that are outside of traditional Jewish tradition, because he's soon going to get into cultivating kindness through tzedakah and zakah, right? Which is the Muslim equivalent, of tzedakah. And then he goes into Lashon Hara and he quotes from the Chafetz Chaim, right? And he tells the story of the feathers, right? And then he comes back to the thing that's not even from, I don't think it's from any religious tradition. Before you speak, ask yourself 3 questions. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Right? And that might be a secular, I don't know where that came from, but it might be a totally secular thing. So excuse me for the long-winded response to you, but I hear you, and I think that we all share, sometimes I think when I read his book, I just turned 68. And sometimes I say to myself, oh, great, if I was 35, maybe I would go live in in an ashram, do a retreat. I can do a retreat, but I'm not going to go someplace and live for a year. As maybe some of you have done that, but at a younger age, or maybe some of you still desire to do that now. But it's not where I'm going, and everything that I'm doing. Listen, I used to go sit with Tara Brach every Wednesday night. What, you know who she is? Okay, everybody know who Tara Brach is? She's like a guru in the insight meditation, and she's a very respected teacher. And I would sit there the entire time, and what would I do? I would translate everything she said through my lens and understand it in Jewishly, quote unquote, right? So that I can take what she was offering and I can then move it through my kli, my vessel, and understand it. And I sometimes she'd be talking and I said, oh yeah, that's what this rabbi said. She ain't making this stuff up. She's standing on the shoulders of a lot of spiritual teachers of all, stripes, and Jewish ones being among them. Yeah, Judy?
Yeah, and we should note that she herself is Jewish.
Yes.
That's her background. So when I listen to her, I have those same experiences that you're describing. I wanted to say something about dipping into Buddhism and other traditions, Christianity, whatever. For me, there is a sort of acknowledgement that there is a universal truth, and how we understand this universal truth, we can do it through a lot of different lenses, but the universal truth is pretty constant. And I think that the great religious traditions acknowledge it and experience it in very similar ways. Language is different, but what we're experiencing is that that nothingness, that that my qigong teacher would say, what we're experiencing is the universal sea of qi. The kind of life force that's just part of the universe.
Many paths, one God.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's Matthew Fox's book? Many rivers, one, somebody remind me.
One river, many wells.
One river, many wells. Thank you. Yeah, so absolutely. Linda, does that help at all? I hope it does. And that none of this feels, I mean, it's all worth talking, worth delving into. And it'll remain for many of us just an idea, something that's a wonderful thing, but I'm never going to immerse myself into it.
I'm in kindergarten. It's fine. It's really
everything
okay.
you need to know in life you learned in kindergarten.
Yes, I'm still focusing on the basics though, and I'm thinking, oh my God, where else do I need to start to go? And I'm like, I don't know that I'm ready to go anywhere else yet. So the question had to be asked.
Absolutely. Thank you. Um, I'm looking at I want to be conscious of time, and I'm looking at oh yeah, okay, it's bottom of page 73. He says something which I don't know if I agree with, and I was wondering about you all. He says, and this is about being generous, right? It is when I have to limit my own spending to help you financially that we can truly speak of generosity. Does that hit any of you as not saying exactly what I think he means? Because if he says, if Bill and Melinda Gates give $5, are they being generous? No. But when they donate millions, that indeed is generosity. Well, actually, I'm not sure that's right. If they give $1 billion like they have, to different causes, that's being generous. A few million. So maybe he was off in his, in the way he expressed himself. I don't know. Did that rub anybody else? If not, we'll keep moving on. So he goes into now on page 74, talking about cultivating kindness through tzedakah and zakah. And at the end of the first paragraph, he says, Zakah is a spiritual discipline that purifies you from the delusion of ownership. I don't know about you, but I love that. And it makes me think of in the first paragraph of the Amidah, there are a number of names of God, right? Harofeh, Rofeh Cholim, Matir Asurim. But then it says Koneh Hakol. The God is Koneh Hakol. Does anybody know what that means translated, and any way to look at what that means? Koneh Hakol. Yep, Scott.
I think it means the owner of everything, sort of like the earth's landlord.
Exactly. That's exactly what it means. So in modern Hebrew, Koneh is a landlord.
And that's the reason that we aren't supposed to, that we're supposed to leave the corners of our field, and we're not supposed to pick up the crops that we drop, because they're not really ours entirely.
Right. We're kind of like not sharecroppers. We're good
tenant farmers.
Tenant farmers. There you go. Right. We're taking care of this place, and in the small amount of time that we're here. So next time that you're davening, that paragraph, and you get to Koneh Hakol, stop for a second, because therein is another lovely opportunity to just stop and breathe and to enter into Moachin de Gadlut, spacious mind. This idea that divinity is the landlord, right? And we're the tenant farmers. Selfishness and greed are the great temptations. They pollute the soul. Zakah or tzedakah purifies the heart from these traits. And we all know this feeling. I am very fortunate in that at that time in my life, I don't think I was a very generous person. I know that Renee has innately is very generous in a way that I was not, and I've learned a lot from her about just unfolding my hands in many different ways. And so now here we enter into, Linda, a lot of different Jewish thoughts on giving, including Maimonides' 8 levels of tzedakah that many of us are familiar with. on page 76. Would someone read through those? And also remember that even the poor are expected, required to give tzedakah. Somebody
The
read?
medieval, I have it.
Go ahead.
The medieval Jewish philosopher Maimonides lists 8 levels of tzedakah. 1, giving grudgingly. 2, giving less than you should, but doing so cheerfully. 3, giving after being asked. 4, giving before being asked. 5, giving when you don't know the recipient, but the recipient knows you. 6, giving when you know the recipient, but the recipient does not know you. 7, giving when both giver and receiver are unknown to one another. 8, enabling the recipient to become self-sufficient and no longer in need of tzedakah.
Good guidelines, right? All of this arises, of course, from you shall open your hands to the needy, which is, I wish I knew the Hebrew for it off the tip of my tongue, but I don't, which is in Sefer Vayikra, I believe. But certainly, again, it's repeated in Devarim, in the last book of the Bible. In reading this part about tzedakah, it always brings up my, and I'm curious about you, my impulse when someone on the street is asking for something. Right? So I don't know about you, but I don't tend to carry any money around anymore. Yeah, I think I card my credit card or I tap. And so I love his idea, and the later in the chapter, to carry a little purse around for that purposes. But I'm just wondering if any of you would like to just share how you, in the past, how you now, how you would love to, open your hands, to people on the street, for instance. When I'm in Jerusalem, I'm much different than I am when I'm in DC. Right? When somebody has their hand out. Anyway, Mary Rita, do you something to add?
Yeah, my office is right down by Farragut Square, and I certainly got to know many of the same people that were around. I did not give, but I often gave my time. Some of the people I would sit down next to on the bench and talk to them and just listen to them and get to know their story. Not for long. Sometimes I would go in and buy some soup for one guy, but most of the time I would just ask how they are.
Mhm.
If there was anyone that like kind of really got to my heart, it would be like some of the veterans that might be there. But I'd also ask them about their service and thank them for their service.
So provide them with a listening ear.
Yes.
And
Yeah, because I didn't know where the money was going to go. So
right. Well, we're suspicious in that way.
The hard part is when you pass the people the same time each day, like when you're driving to work. And so I used to pass a man on the corner of Jones Bridge in Connecticut, and I would have an apple or a granola bar or something like purposefully brought along, something easy to hand. And so if the light was red and I was stopped, I'd open my window and give him some kind of food. And if the light was green, I would just keep going so as to not cause an accident. But, it's the seeing, day in and day out, and and ignoring that need day in and day out I couldn't do it. But I also wasn't super enthused about giving money every day. So something, or a bottle of water, whatever, but something.
I used to carry those peanut butter crackers or the cheese crackers in my car, just so that when I reach the end of the exit ramp and there's a light and there's somebody there asking for something, or you're on the street and you're at a red light, I didn't have to turn away, or I didn't have to ignore them. But I think just the simple act of reaching out our hands is it does bring, what did I give today? And I think in there, giving and receiving, the word in Hebrew is natan, it's a palindrome. Um, Even though we don't do something like that in order to receive, we do receive at the same time, for sure. Um, I did crack myself up as I was reading at the bottom of page 77 about the Free Loan Society that Rami shared that he started at his synagogue. Why did I crack myself up? Because as I was rereading this, I asked myself the question, well, maybe that's something we need to do with Moshe. Invite people to, give like $10. If we have 80 people, that's $800, you know? And then when somebody is in need in that way, that we'd be able to help them. And then I turned the page to page 78, and right at the top of the page years ago, when I was reading this for the first time, I said, good idea for the Northwest Minyan, which is what I called Minyan Oneg Shabbat when we started out. It was the Northwest Minyan meeting, Northwest Washington. So that kind of cracked me up. All right, let's start to come in for a landing, and we're.
Can I just say
Yeah,
something
sorry.
about the eight levels? Because as soon as I got to 7, I thought about yours and Renee's story about the challah and the bima. And there, I mean, is it that, or is it a level 9 when they're giving to, they think it's something going to the Lord and coming from? It's this interesting intermediary in the process.
Maybe there is a 9 here. But it's a surprise to both of them when it's revealed, who's doing the giving. Everybody know the story that Jay's referring to, Chala's in the Ark. Yeah.
I love that story.
Me too. Me too. Alrighty. The Baal Shem Tov says we only have a certain number of words in our lifetime. And when we've spoken them, the last of those words, then we die. It's actually it's worth thinking about, before we say anything, right? And when he talks, where is that? On 81 on the bottom, of find a way of complimenting the bride without violating the truth or her feelings. My band has played hundreds of weddings, and would I call certain brides beautiful? Well, that's not up to me to say, but the rabbis had something to say about this, which is where Rami goes. And I want to share this teaching with you from the Talmud. Okay, I need to open it up. There it is. Okay, hold on a second. There it is. Okay, this is in Masechet Ketubot, which makes sense because that's all about weddings. And the sages taught, Tanu Rabbanan, Ketzad Maraktim Lifnei HaKala. Okay, how does one dance before the bride? Alrighty. And there is a song that goes with this, of course, which my band sang. It's a traditional melody, traditional words. Ketzad Maraktim Lifnei HaKala. Ketzad Maraktim Lifnei HaKala. It asks the question, how does one dance before the bride? Now, Beit Shammai says, I'm sorry, I'm going to skip down here. One recites praise of the bride as she is, emphasizing her good qualities. And Beit Hillel says, one recites a fair and attractive bride. And Beit Shammai says the Beit Hillel, in a case where the bride was lame or blind, does one say with regard to her, a fair and attractive bride? But the Torah states, keep you from a false matter. All right. So Beit Hillel says to Beit Shammai, according to your statement, with regard to one who acquired an inferior acquisition from the market, we're not going to go into how that equates with the bride and groom. We don't do that in our community. Should another praise it and enhance its value in his eyes, or condemn it and diminish his value in his eyes? You must say that he should praise it and enhance its value in his eyes. Right? For here the sages said a person's disposition should always be empathetic with mankind and treat everyone courteously, right? So what's in bold is what's in the Talmud, and what's in more gray, it's not bolded, it's really more commentary, so we can understand what is being offered here. And then it says, "Ketzemenaktim, ketzemenaktim, lifnei hakala, kila na, kila ya, chasidim." And so it says, how does one dance? You dance by saying it's a beautiful and modest bride, right? She's always beautiful because the bride is electric on her wedding day, and to say that any person is modest is a positive trait. And so the rabbis make a spin on this, and it shouldn't only be for a person's wedding day, but it should be all the time, that we should be careful with our words. And then Chafetz Chaim has all of these guidelines on page 83 that we're not going to go through right now, but except for to say this whole issue of gossip. Renee and I were once at Lincoln Square Synagogue in Manhattan, which is near Lincoln Center, and the rabbi was giving a drash on Lashon Hara. And clearly, because he said so, it was part of a series of drashot that he was giving on it. And basically what it came down to was, you should never say anything about anybody. You should never say anything about anybody because it's a slippery slope. And then you might say, well, then what would we talk about? If we didn't talk about other people.
We talk about Torah.
Aha! Who said that? Yeah, Judy. Yes, we talk Torah, right? That we're not supposed to walk, how many cubits without talking about Torah. And we're supposed to, be like this, we're supposed to have blinders to everything else. And then we won't be so busy to talk about other people. But we know that even the most, righteous, quote unquote, among us, they talk about other people. So this is an aspiration that we, together with that, we only have so many words that to be careful when we're talking about other people. There is, this is one of the places where we need to develop a break, which is what mindfulness, practice helps us do, or any kind of meditation practice, which is to help us develop a break, that when we get to that place where we recognize, oh, here it comes, it's like you go, you slam on the brake and just cut off any access to that road, and the more that we do it, the better practice we are at it. I forget his name, who has written Renee would know. He writes a lot of books about the human condition. He's Israeli. Does this ring a bell? Elliot, Who am I talking about? I have the book in the other
No,
room.
I was going to say that captures just about 90% of the Israeli population.
Is one of his names Yuval?
Yes, thank you.
Yuval Noah Harari.
Exactly.
Hariri.
That's right. So his treatise is that it's through storytelling that people pass on their culture and history and memory, of course. And he talks a little bit that sometimes that equates with gossip, right? That how would I know that what my great grandmother was all about if people didn't talk about her? So there clearly there are boundaries here about how we do these things, and I think that's for each and one of us to arrive at that place and that truth for us. Whew. It's always such a beautiful. Thank you so much. I learned so much, and it helps me to refine my midot, in talking about these things. To hear what you have to say helps me remember what I need to think about for myself. Any last thoughts before we bid adieu for the night?
Do you want us to keep reading?
Well, good question, Carol Ann. The answer is yes, into the next chapter, which is Emet, right? Now, I haven't decided, truthfully, whether next Wednesday night we're going to meet, only because I'm leaving on Thursday for Israel.
Oh, wow.
And I don't want to feel, any anxiety about getting everything done before next Wednesday night. But if I have everything done, I will know. Matter of fact, I'm going to take a screenshot of all of you who are here so that we're going to meet. if we're going to meet, and I'll send you a personal email, and I'll send something out last minute on Wednesday too, if we are going to meet. So right now, let's assume that we're not going to meet, and the next time that we meet to discuss this will be when Reb Rami is with us, God willing, on December the 15th. Okay, so as you're reading, jot down some questions, that you want to bring to him. I've been doing that, and he'll want to hear from you all as well.
Mark, some of us may also be involved in getting ready for the holiday, so maybe you should.
That's true. Wednesday night, people are traveling.
Yeah,
People are.
Yeah, we've got cooking and.
Yeah. Should we just say that we'll take?
Yeah.
Okay.
Too busy. It's too busy.
Yes. No. Shoot me a note. I don't want to go if a number of you already know that the turkey's going to be in the oven or the tofurkey, and that you're going to be busy with family too. Let's just decide.
Yeah,
it's a nap.
let's not meet next week.
Okay.
That's what I would do.
Gag is good to hate. Let's not meet, and instead give you a little music, a little traveling music to go out with.
Wonderful.
Ketsabaraktim lifnei hakala. Ketsabaraktim lifnei hakala. Hilana kilaya chasid, hilana kilaya chasid. Ay 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 ay. Ya la 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 la. Ay la la la. Ya la 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 la. And then my band would play. Bum 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 ba bum 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 ba da. Ya la 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 ya 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 la 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 la. Ay ay ay. Ba da ba 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 da da. Ya la 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 la. Ay 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 ya la 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 la. Ay ay ay. The truth.
How about a little Robbie Robertson? I didn't know what shirt to wear today, but it was like perfect.
There you go. I don't know if I mentioned that my band has played its last official gig, that I retired the band a couple of weeks ago. Although if somebody calls, it depends who it is, we might get together and play again. But I thought if we did play again, Jay, that I'd have Scorsese come do a documentary called The Last Schmaltz. Elliot, yeah, I know.
The weight of that.
All right, on that note, let's stop the recording.